Get out of my way, you dirty cleaner. The roar of an engine shattered the morning quiet. A pristine white BMW was racing toward the company gates, its driver having spotted a large, muddy puddle near the sidewalk. She aimed for it. With a violent slam, the car plowed through the water, sending a geyser of filth erupting into the air. It crashed down over Victoria, a young black woman in a simple cleaning uniform, drenching her from head to toe. The foul water soaked through her clothes and splattered across her face, dripping from her hair in thick brown rivulets. Her small lunch bag was ruined, her cleaning supplies scattered across the pavement. She had just been trying to get to work. But the driver, a wealthy white woman named Madison Blake, had other plans. A cruel smile spread across Madison's face. This was a perfect opportunity to put someone in their place. She slammed on the brakes and the tinted window slid down, revealing a mask of perfect makeup and expensive sunglasses. Her red lipstick gleamed as she let out a sharp, mocking laugh. "Maybe now you'll learn to stay out of the way," she called out, her voice dripping with venomous glee. "This is what happens when people like you don't know where you belong." Victoria stood frozen, a statue of mud and humiliation. Water dripped from her chin, forming a small puddle at her feet. Her wet uniform clung to her body, making her feel exposed and small, but her eyes remained steady, a calm surface over a gathering storm of anger. Madison wasn't finished. "Welcome to Sterling Tech, cleaning lady," she sneered, then gunned the engine and sped toward her reserved executive parking spot. Victoria didn't move. She didn't speak. She simply stood there, committing every detail to memory. The sound of the laugh, the glint of the sunglasses, the sting of the insult. Other employees arriving for work stared, their silence heavy with discomfort. Some looked away, ashamed. Others smirked and whispered. But Madison Blake had no idea what she had just done. The woman she had just drenched in mud wasn't just any cleaning lady. She was Victoria Sterling, the billionaire founder and CEO of Sterling Tech, the building Madison worked in, the salary she earned, the parking spot she so arrogantly claimed. It all belonged to the woman she had just tried to break. Victoria finally bent down, picked up her ruined bag, and continued toward the entrance. Her shoes squelched with every step, leaving muddy footprints on the immaculate sidewalk. She was about to begin the most illuminating day of her life, and Madison Blake was about to learn that some people should never be crossed. The mud was still dripping from her uniform as she walked through the doors of her own company, and Madison had no idea she had just declared war on the most powerful woman in Texas. The woman wiping dirty water from her face was Victoria Sterling. At 35, she was one of the most powerful women in America, though you wouldn't know it to look at her now. Victoria had built Sterling Tech from nothing. 20 years ago, she was a single mother working 3 jobs just to survive. She cleaned offices by night, performed data entry by day, and coded websites on weekends, all while raising her daughter alone. But Victoria possessed a rare gift for seeing the future. Back in 2005, when most dismissed social media as a fad, she was already building the algorithms that would power the next generation of technology. She launched Sterling Tech from her tiny apartment with a borrowed laptop and $1,500 to her name. The first year, she barely made enough for groceries. The second, she hired her first employee. By year 5, she was worth $10 million. By year 10, $100 million. Now, at 35, Victoria Sterling's net worth exceeded $3 billion. Sterling Tech wasn't just another company. It was part of the internet's backbone. Victoria employed over 15,000 people across 12 countries, and her Austin headquarters was a global beacon of innovation. But with immense success came a problem she had never anticipated. The higher she climbed, the more disconnected she became from the people who made her company run. Whispers had reached her, rumors of mistreatment, of untouchable executives, of a culture rotting from within. Victoria had founded her company on the principle that every single person mattered, regardless of their title. The thought that her own employees were abusing their power made her physically ill. After being out of the country for 3 years on a professional development sabbatical, she had returned, unannounced. She made a decision that would have sent her board of directors into a panic. She was going undercover. For the past 3 weeks, Victoria Sterling, billionaire CEO, had been showing up to work as Vicky, a quiet woman who mopped floors and emptied trash cans. Her disguise was simple but effective. Only one person knew the truth: Marcus Thompson, her head of security, who was helping to coordinate the secret investigation. Madison Blake, Sterling Tech's 38-year-old vice president of marketing, was the embodiment of everything Victoria despised. Raised in Highland Park, one of Dallas's most affluent neighborhoods, Madison was the daughter of a federal judge and a prominent socialite. She had never once faced a real consequence for her actions. Since joining Sterling Tech 3 years ago, she had carved out her own fiefdom, promoting sycophants and terrorizing anyone who dared to question her. To Madison, the world was simple. There were people who mattered, and there were people who served them. Cleaning staff, security guards, assistants, they were all firmly in the second category. Watching the incident unfold with a knot in her stomach was Angela Rodriguez. At 29, Angela was one of the sharpest minds in the analytics department. The daughter of Mexican immigrants, she had watched her parents work tirelessly, her father in construction, her mother cleaning houses, to give her a chance at a better life. She understood the dignity in every job and the worth of every person. She had seen how Madison treated people, and it sickened her. There was something different about Vicky, the new cleaning lady, though. A quiet confidence that didn't fit the uniform. Then there was Robert Chen, Madison's closest ally. At 52, the executive vice president was the poster child for toxic middle management. He had watched Madison's attack from his own car and had actually laughed. In his view, it was exactly what was needed to keep people in their place. But the most important witness, aside from Victoria herself, was Marcus Thompson. At 35, the director of security was one of the few who understood what Sterling Tech was supposed to stand for. When Victoria had first proposed her plan, Marcus was skeptical, warning her that what she found might be worse than she imagined. He agreed to help because he knew she was right. Something was deeply wrong. For 3 weeks, he had watched his boss endure treatment that would have made anyone else quit. He'd seen her clean messes deliberately made worse, watched her be ignored and dismissed. But nothing had prepared him for the sight of Madison Blake intentionally drenching the founder of the company in mud. 20 minutes later, Victoria was pushing her cleaning cart down the executive corridor when she heard Madison's voice booming from the main conference room. What she heard next made her blood run cold. She realized this wasn't about a few bad apples. This was about a fundamental failure of leadership. Her leadership. In her focus on growth, she had delegated too much to people who didn't share her values. She had created a system where cruelty could flourish. Over the next few hours, Madison Blake launched a systematic campaign of harassment designed to break Vicky, the cleaning lady. And Victoria was forced to endure every humiliating moment, documenting the rot that had infested her own company. It started small, as workplace bullying often does. Madison would walk past Victoria's cart and accidentally knock over a stack of supplies, then stand with her arms crossed. "Clean this up," she'd command, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear, "and try to do it right this time." Victoria would quietly collect the scattered bottles, biting her tongue as Madison smirked in satisfaction. But Madison craved an audience. Around 10:30, she cornered Victoria in the main hallway, just outside the marketing department. "Excuse me," Madison said, her voice oozing false politeness. "I think you missed a spot." Victoria glanced at the floor she had just mopped. It was immaculate. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Where?" Madison pointed a manicured finger at a perfectly clean tile. "Right there. It's filthy. Do it again." Victoria knew it was a test, a public display of dominance. She also knew that every employee watching was learning a lesson about what was acceptable at Sterling Tech. So she got down on her hands and knees and began to scrub the spotless floor. "You know," Madison announced to the growing crowd, "some people just don't have what it takes to work here. They think showing up is enough. They don't understand that at Sterling Tech, excellence matters." Victoria's jaw tightened. She could hear the nervous whispers of her employees. Some looked away, but no one spoke. Robert Chen emerged from his office, drawn by the commotion. Instead of intervening, he joined in. "You're absolutely right, Madison," he declared. "Standards matter. When we let things slide, people start to think mediocrity is acceptable." Victoria finished scrubbing and stood up, her knees aching. She looked Madison directly in the eye, and for a split second, Madison faltered under the intensity of her gaze, but the cruelty quickly returned. "Don't look at me like that," Madison snapped. "You should be thanking me for improving your work quality." In that moment, Victoria understood. Madison wasn't just a bully. She was someone who derived genuine pleasure from inflicting pain on those she deemed powerless. This wasn't about standards. It was about a profound lack of empathy. For the next hour, the harassment escalated. Madison made her clean the same bathroom 3 times. She had her reorganize an already perfect supply closet. She found fault with every task, criticizing her loudly for all to hear. And the worst part was seeing others join in, or say nothing at all. Kevin from sales began leaving messes for her. Sarah from HR discussed Vicky's performance issues with another manager while Victoria was standing right there. The culture Victoria had spent 20 years building was being systematically dismantled before her eyes. By noon, the campaign had become a form of office entertainment. People were gathering to watch Madison berate the cleaning lady. It was then that Victoria knew she had to see how deep the rot went. The quarterly board presentation was at 2:00 p.m. Madison would be presenting. Normally, Victoria would be leading this meeting. Today, she would be serving the coffee. She arrived early to set up, the irony thick in the air. She was preparing refreshments for a meeting about her own company, dressed as an invisible servant. The board members filed in, some of the most powerful people in Texas. She had negotiated billion-dollar deals with these men and women. Now, as she moved around the room with a coffee pot, not a single one of them gave her a second glance. Madison entered the room, radiating a triumphant confidence. Victoria realized the morning's cruelty hadn't been random. It was a calculated prelude to the argument Madison was about to make. As you know, Madison began, her voice smooth and assured, Sterling Tech has always prided itself on being an employee-friendly company. But I believe we must ask ourselves if that philosophy is hurting our competitiveness. Victoria's hand tightened on the coffee pot. Madison was using her core values as a weapon against them. This morning provided a perfect example, Madison said, clicking to a new slide. One of our cleaning staff showed a complete lack of respect for company property. When I addressed the situation professionally, she became argumentative. The lie was so audacious it was almost brilliant. The board members nodded, accepting her version without question. This incident highlights a fundamental problem, Madison continued. Our support staff have become too comfortable, too entitled. They forget this is a business, not a charity. Robert Chen leaned forward, playing his part. Madison, what are you proposing? Madison smiled. I recommend we outsource all janitorial, maintenance, and food service positions. This would save us $2.3 million annually, and more importantly, re-establish the proper workplace hierarchy. Victoria felt a wave of nausea. The numbers were fabricated. She knew her company's financials inside and out. But Madison was presenting fiction as fact, and no one was challenging her. Dr. Patricia Williams, a long-serving board member, raised a hand. How many employees would this affect? 37 full-time positions, Madison replied coolly. Easily replaceable. As Victoria refilled Dr. Williams's cup, she heard the older woman mutter, 37 families, right before the holidays. That's harsh. But Madison was prepared. Patricia, I understand, but business is about making tough decisions. These employees have had every opportunity to prove their value. The fact that they haven't suggests they are not a fit for our culture of excellence. It was a perfect trap. She had reframed cruelty as professionalism and destroying lives as a sound business strategy, and the board was buying it. Then, a voice cut through the room like a shard of glass. Excuse me. It was Angela Rodriguez, sitting at the junior staff table. The room went silent. Junior analysts were meant to be silent observers. Madison's expression turned to ice. Angela, this is not the appropriate forum. But Angela stood her ground. With all due respect, Madison, you're asking the board to make a decision based on incomplete information. I've analyzed the true costs of outsourcing these services, and the numbers don't support your conclusions. Victoria held her breath. The words, spoken with quiet conviction, sliced through the tense boardroom air. This young woman, Angela, was risking her entire career to challenge Madison Blake's web of lies, and Victoria had never felt a fiercer surge of pride in an employee. Madison's voice, when she finally spoke, was a shard of ice. Angela, you are overstepping your boundaries in a profound and serious way. I'm going to give you one chance to sit down and be silent. But Angela stood her ground. The contractor you're proposing has an annual turnover rate of 340%. The hidden costs of constant retraining, the degradation of service quality, and the inherent security risks make this proposal significantly more expensive than our current staffing model. Not to mention, she added, her voice hardening, you're proposing to fire 37 families 3 weeks before Christmas. A wave of murmurs swept through the room as board members absorbed the staggering data. Victoria fought the urge to cheer, forcing herself to remain a phantom in the corner. Madison rose to her feet, her meticulously prepared presentation momentarily forgotten. Angela, you're clearly not equipped for this level of professional responsibility, Madison said, her words a public execution. I think we need to have a serious discussion about whether you belong in this room at all. The threat hung in the air, thick and undeniable. Victoria watched as other junior employees shifted in their seats, their faces tight with discomfort. They were witnessing a career being dismantled in real time for the crime of speaking the truth. But then, a shift in the current. Dr. Patricia Williams, her voice a calm counterpoint to Madison's venom, cleared her throat. Actually, she said firmly, I would like to hear more about Angela's analysis. If there are legitimate concerns about the financial projections, we have a duty to address them before making any decision. Madison's face went white. She had banked on the board's automatic deference to executive leadership, but Dr. Williams was one of the most respected voices in the room. Patricia, with all due respect, Robert Chen interjected quickly. We can't let junior staff dictate board policy. No one is dictating anything, Robert, Dr. Williams replied, her gaze unwavering. But we cannot make informed decisions based on incomplete information. Angela, do you have documentation to support your claims? Angela produced a tablet and began to present a stream of data that Victoria knew, with absolute certainty, was impeccably accurate. As the young woman spoke, a wave of pride washed over Victoria, so potent it nearly brought tears to her eyes. This was what Sterling Tech was meant to be, a place where people stood for what was right, especially when it was hard. But Madison was not finished. As Angela built her case, Madison began a subtle campaign of sabotage. She rolled her eyes, whispered conspiratorially to Robert, and punctuated the presentation with small, audible sighs of dismissal. When Angela concluded, Madison went on the attack. Well, that was certainly comprehensive, she said, her tone dripping with condescension. But I think we're missing the forest for the trees. Angela's analysis is fixated on short-term costs. It completely ignores the long-term benefits of establishing proper workplace standards. She clicked back to her own presentation, and now Victoria saw it with new eyes. Each slide was a masterclass in dehumanization, crafted to make the firing of her employees seem not just reasonable, but necessary. The incident I witnessed this morning was just one symptom of a much larger disease, Madison continued, her voice gaining momentum. When employees no longer respect the company hierarchy, when they feel they can challenge management decisions with impunity, when they believe their jobs are guaranteed regardless of performance, that is when you get the kind of entitled behavior that cripples our bottom line. The realization struck Victoria like a physical blow. Madison was using Angela's courage as evidence for her own twisted argument. The young woman's integrity was being reframed as insubordination, proof that the workforce needed to be brought to heel. I'm not just proposing a cost-cutting measure, Madison concluded, her eyes sweeping across the board. I'm proposing a cultural reset, one that will ensure Sterling Tech remains competitive in an increasingly brutal market. The discussion that followed was painful. Most board members seemed genuinely torn, but Madison had framed the debate so cunningly that cruelty now masqueraded as good business. Victoria stood in her corner, invisible, listening as the company she had built was being dismantled by a woman who had perverted its every principle. But the worst was yet to come. As the meeting wound down, Madison delivered her final, devastating argument. I want to leave you with one final thought, she said, adopting the tone of a seasoned philosopher. Sterling Tech has always prided itself on being different, on treating its employees like family. But perhaps it's time we ask ourselves if that approach is actually helping anyone. She gestured vaguely toward the corner where Victoria stood, a silent figure with a coffee pot. As the board members filed out, Victoria understood. Her undercover investigation had unearthed something far more sinister than workplace harassment. Madison Blake wasn't just a bully. She was a predator who fed on power, using the language of corporate strategy to justify her own sadism. But Madison had made one fatal miscalculation. She assumed the quiet woman in the corner was powerless. She had no idea that every lie, every sneer, every calculated cruelty had been absorbed by the one person in the building who could end her career with a single word. Victoria Sterling was done being invisible. It was time for Madison Blake to learn the meaning of real consequences. The final straw came at 4:30 that afternoon. Victoria was polishing the glass panels of the main lobby when Madison appeared, flanked by Robert Chen and a small entourage of executives and junior staff. "There she is," Madison announced, her voice booming across the marble floor. She pointed at Victoria as if unveiling a monument. "Our star employee." Victoria looked up, her cloth frozen mid-swipe. She recognized the cruel, theatrical gleam in Madison's eyes. This wasn't another passing insult. This was a performance. "I've been thinking about our conversation this morning," Madison continued, her voice projecting to the growing crowd, "about workplace standards and knowing one's place, and I realized my message wasn't clear enough." Victoria slowly set down her cleaning supplies. She sensed that whatever came next would be the final test of her composure. "Get down on your hands and knees," Madison commanded, her voice echoing in the cavernous space. "I want you to clean this entire lobby floor, properly this time." Victoria glanced at the floor. It was immaculate. She had mopped it less than an hour ago. But this had nothing to do with cleanliness. This was a pure, unadulterated display of power. "Ma'am, the floor is already clean," Victoria said quietly. A predatory excitement flared in Madison's eyes. "Are you arguing with me? Are you actually standing there arguing with a senior executive?" The crowd was swelling. Employees from every department were gathering, drawn by the spectacle. Some looking mortified, others morbidly fascinated. "No, ma'am," Victoria replied, her voice even. "I'm simply stating that I have already cleaned this floor." "And I'm stating it's not clean enough," Madison retorted. "And since I am the executive and you are the help, my opinion is the only one that matters. Now, on your knees." Something inside Victoria finally snapped. For 3 weeks she had endured it all. The insults, the impossible tasks, the casual dehumanization. And now, Madison Blake was demanding she crawl on the floor of her own building for the entertainment of her own employees. But in that same instant, Victoria realized this was the moment she had been waiting for. Madison, drunk on her own authority, had just crossed a line so egregious that even her most loyal sycophants would struggle to defend it. This wasn't discipline. This was sadism, staged for public consumption. So, Victoria did as she was told. She got down on her hands and knees and began to scrub the pristine floor. "This is where you belong," Madison announced to her audience, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "On the ground, where everyone can see what happens when people forget their place in the world." As Victoria scrubbed, Madison continued her monologue, each word a carefully chosen barb. "You see, people like this, they think they deserve respect simply for existing," she said, gesturing at Victoria as if she were an exhibit. "They think showing up is enough, but in the real world, hierarchies exist for a reason." Victoria could hear whispers ripple through the crowd. For the first time, she sensed that Madison might have finally overplayed her hand. That's when Angela Rodriguez pushed through the onlookers. "Stop it," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "This is wrong. Just stop it." Madison turned, her expression like that of a cat whose playtime had been interrupted. "Excuse me?" "I said stop it," Angela repeated, her voice gaining strength. "This is harassment, it's abuse, and it needs to stop, right now." The lobby fell into a shocked silence. Everyone understood the magnitude of what was happening. Angela Rodriguez was committing career suicide for the second time in a single day, this time to defend a cleaning woman. Madison's face flushed with pure rage. "You are so far out of line, you can't even see it anymore. I am going to have security escort you out of this building, and then I will personally ensure you never work in this industry again." Angela didn't even flinch. "Fine, fire me, but I will not stand here and watch you torture someone for your own amusement." Tears pricked Victoria's eyes, but they were not tears of humiliation. They were for Angela Rodriguez, this brave young woman who was willing to sacrifice everything to defend someone she believed was powerless. "Security!" Madison shrieked. "I need security in the lobby immediately." That's when Victoria made her decision. She had seen enough. She had learned everything she needed to know. Slowly, Victoria rose to her feet, dirt and cleaning solution staining her hands. She looked Madison Blake directly in the eye, and when she spoke, her voice carried across the entire lobby with an authority no one had heard before. "That won't be necessary." Victoria pulled out her phone and sent a single text message to Marcus Thompson, her head of security. The message contained one word: enough. It was followed by another: boardroom, emergency meeting in 10 minutes. Madison let out a harsh, disbelieving laugh. "Are you serious? You think you can call board meetings? You're a cleaning lady." Victoria offered no reply. She simply turned and walked toward the executive elevator bank, leaving her bucket and rags in the middle of the floor. "Where do you think you're going?" Madison yelled after her. "I haven't dismissed you." But Victoria was already stepping into the polished steel elevator, the one that required a platinum keycard, the one that went directly to the executive suites. Madison's laughter died in her throat as the doors slid silently shut. For the next 7 minutes, chaos consumed the lobby. Madison attempted to regain control, stammering explanations to her bewildered audience. Robert Chen was frantically trying to reach security on his phone, and in the center of it all stood Angela Rodriguez, looking stunned but relieved. Meanwhile, 42 floors above, Victoria was in her private office, shedding her uniform for the charcoal gray business suit she kept in her executive closet. She looked at her reflection, and for the first time in 3 weeks, saw not Vicky the cleaning lady, but Victoria Sterling. Her phone buzzed relentlessly with confused texts from board members. She took a deep, steadying breath. For 3 weeks, she had been a ghost. Now, it was time for a resurrection. Down in the lobby, Madison had managed to convince herself that the emergency meeting was merely a coincidence. "All right, everyone, show's over," she announced with forced bravado. "Back to work, and if anyone sees that cleaning woman, tell her she's fired." She was still riding a wave of self-satisfaction as she strode into the boardroom. And then she froze. Sitting at the head of the long mahogany table, in a suit that cost more than Madison's monthly salary, was the woman she had been torturing for weeks. The woman she had just forced to scrub the lobby floor. Madison's face went slack, her skin turning the color of ash. "Hello, Madison," Victoria said, her voice calm and level. "I'm Victoria Sterling, founder and CEO of Sterling Tech, and you're fired." Madison's mouth opened and closed, but no sound emerged. Her mind scrambled to reconcile the powerless janitor with the billionaire magnate sitting before her. That's impossible," she finally whispered. "Sit down, Madison," Victoria commanded, her voice imbued with an authority that shook the room. The boardroom was filling with bewildered executives and board members. Robert Chen stumbled to his seat, his face pale as the horrifying reality began to dawn on him. Victoria stood, her presence commanding the absolute attention of everyone present. "For the past 3 weeks," she began, "I have been working undercover as a member of our cleaning staff. I wanted to see firsthand how my employees treat one another when they believe no one of importance is watching." A shockwave of gasps and whispers filled the room. "What I discovered," Victoria continued, her voice cold as steel, "was worse than I could have ever imagined. I witnessed systemic harassment, deliberate cruelty, and a complete perversion of every value this company was built upon." She turned her gaze directly on Madison, who seemed to be hyperventilating. "You, Madison Blake, spent 3 weeks systematically tormenting someone you thought was beneath you. You splashed mud on me. You humiliated me in public. And just 20 minutes ago, you forced me to crawl on my hands and knees in our lobby for sport." Victoria clicked a remote. The large screen on the wall flickered to life, playing security footage. The mud splashing incident, the harassment in the hallways, and finally the degrading spectacle in the lobby, complete with crystal-clear audio of Madison's smug pronouncements. "But far worse than your deplorable treatment of me," Victoria said, her voice rising, "was your plot to destroy 37 families right before the holidays to pad your profit margins. You lied to this board. You manipulated data. And you tried to ruin the career of Angela Rodriguez for the simple act of telling the truth." Madison finally found her voice. "Victoria, I had no idea. If I had known who you were—" "Stop," Victoria cut her off, the words sharp as a blade. "That is precisely the point. You treated me this way because you thought I was nobody, because you thought I was powerless. The fact that you would treat any human being like that tells me everything I need to know about your character." "I was trying to maintain workplace standards," Madison pleaded. "You were trying to feed your ego by crushing someone else's spirit," Victoria countered. "And the tragedy is, you've convinced yourself that cruelty is leadership." She turned to the entire room. "This company was built on the principle that every person has value, that character matters more than title, that our success should lift everyone, not just those at the very top." The room was utterly silent. "Madison Blake, your employment with Sterling Tech is terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you from the building." "You can't do this," Madison shrieked. "I have a contract. I'll sue." "You'll what?" Victoria asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "You'll explain to a judge why you felt it was appropriate to torture an employee for 3 weeks? You'll argue that forcing a woman to crawl on the floor constitutes proper management?" Marcus Thompson and 2 security officers appeared at Madison's side. As she was escorted out, still babbling about lawsuits, Victoria turned her attention to Robert Chen. "Robert, your complicity and cowardice have been noted. You enabled Madison's cruelty at every turn. You are also fired." Robert began to cry silently, his career dissolving before his eyes. Then Victoria's expression softened. "Angela Rodriguez." Angela stepped forward, her face a mixture of shock and disbelief. "Angela, you have shown more courage, integrity, and leadership in the last 24 hours than I have seen from some executives in 24 years. You risked everything, twice, to defend a person who could not defend herself. You stood up to a bully when it would have been infinitely easier to stay silent." Angela's eyes filled with tears. "Effective immediately," Victoria announced, her voice ringing with conviction. "You are promoted to Senior Vice President of Workplace Culture and Employee Advocacy. Your first task will be to work directly with me to ensure that what I experienced these past 3 weeks can never, ever happen again at Sterling Tech." The room erupted in spontaneous, thunderous applause. For the first time in a long time, it felt like the applause was for something real. In the moments that followed, Victoria laid the foundation for a new era at Sterling Tech. Her voice, calm but resolute, announced a series of immediate and sweeping changes. There would be mandatory sensitivity training for every executive, an ironclad anonymous system for reporting workplace harassment, and regular cultural audits to ensure the company's values were lived, not just posted on a wall. But her final, most crucial announcement was a personal one. She declared that one day each month would be spent not in her corner office, but on the ground floor, working alongside the very people who were the lifeblood of Sterling Tech. It was a solemn promise to never again lose touch with her own company. As the meeting drew to a close and people began to rise, Victoria held up a hand for one final word. "I need everyone to understand something," she said, her voice carrying the weight of hard-earned wisdom. "True leadership is not about the power you hold over people. It is about using that power for them, to lift them up, to create opportunities, to ensure that every single person in this organization feels seen, valued, and respected." She paused, a flicker of the past 3 weeks in her eyes. "Madison Blake thought she was teaching me a lesson about my place in this world. And she did, just not the one she intended. She taught me that the culture of this company is only as strong as our commitment to protecting our most vulnerable." 6 months later, the transformation of Sterling Tech was palpable. The insidious toxicity that had grown like a cancer through its halls had been carefully and systematically excised. In its place, a new culture of trust and respect flourished. Employee satisfaction soared to unprecedented heights. Productivity surged, turnover plummeted, and the company became a beacon, a testament to the idea that success and human dignity could and should go hand in hand. As for Madison Blake, she did file a lawsuit for wrongful termination. It was a brief, futile effort. The security footage of her conduct was so irrefutably damning that, after 3 short weeks, her own lawyers advised her to retreat. She vanished from the corporate world without a sound. Angela Rodriguez, meanwhile, thrived in her new role. She championed programs that turned Sterling Tech into a national model for employee care, forever carrying the lesson of what it means to stand for what is right, no matter how difficult the stand. And Victoria Sterling? She kept her promise. Every month she traded her suit for a uniform. Some days she was in customer service, others in accounting or maintenance. But once a month, without fail, she could be found in the cleaning department, working side by side with the 37 families Madison had sought to destroy. Because Victoria had learned a fundamental truth that Madison Blake could never grasp. Leadership is not about ascending above others. It is about standing with them. It's about lifting them up and honoring the inherent dignity that every human being deserves, simply for being human. The woman who set out to humiliate a supposedly powerless cleaning lady had, in her arrogance, given Victoria the greatest gift of her career, a stark reminder of who she was and what her company was always meant to be. It was a lesson that didn't just transform a corporation, it uplifted every single person within it. If this story resonated with you, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing it with others, so they can learn too. We'll see you in our next video.